Listen, I want to introduce you to somebody that's very important to me. This is my father. This was taken on his 91st birthday. And if you're like most people, you're probably like, he does not look like he is 91 years old. He looked a lot younger, and I always used to tease him that he had the fountain of youth hidden in his tool shed. I used to say, Daddy, come, stop being so stingy and let us go have a swig of that fountain of youth too. But my dad loved people. Every chance he got to spend time with people, he did it. And it improved his overall quality of life. A couple months after this picture was taken, my father passed away. And he was so satisfied with life. And I remember leading up to the weeks before he died, he said, Melissa, I'm happy. Like, everybody I love loves me back. And I don't know about you, but at the end of my life, I want to feel that way about this ride that we're on. And my dad, his mind was sharp, his body was healthy, and he's what they would call today a superager. So superagers, Northwestern University is doing some really cool research on people that are 80 and older, and what are they doing to still have sharpness of mind? These folks have the cognitive capabilities of their 50 and 60-year-old peers. I know, like, skip the Botox and go make a friend, because what they found is that the fountain of youth is related to two things: staying socially engaged and staying physically active, friends. And so that's why my dad still looked like he was 60 when he was 91, because he plugged into people. And what happens inside of our brains, let me geek out neuroscience a little bit for you. What happens is our brains is what's created when we connect with other people, what I like to call the togethering super blend. There's all these incredible chemicals. Oxytocin, which is that feel-good chemical. You know, when you're falling in love or you're holding a baby, it builds that trust and that bond with other people. We have serotonin that's created in our brains, which boosts our mood and makes us happy. We also have dopamine, which is where the pleasure happens in our brain and gives us motivation. And also endorphins, which help build resilience to stress and help us stay healthier. And baby, when you mix those cocktails together, it creates this incredible togethering super blend. And it only happens when we connect to other people. And when you have that in your body, those properties combine, and guess what? They create anti-inflammatory properties in your body that reduce arthritis and aches and pains, and the likelihood that you'll develop diseases like cardiovascular disease and cognitive decline. It keeps us sharp and healthy. Like, as I mentioned, anybody that wants to reduce aches and pains in their bodies, like, make sure you're plugging into people. My daddy was 91 and he did not get arthritis. I'm still a little jealous about that, but I know it's because he plugged into people. But listen, let's be real honest about it. In our modern times, we spend a lot of time behind screens with remote work and online orders. I don't know about you, but I love ordering my groceries and my jammies. I call it the store at the front door, honey, okay? They deliver my milk and my detergent, and I can go pick it up without going to the store. But guess what? I'm also missing out on opportunities to spend time connecting with other people. And so as a result of disconnection, friends, we're lonelier than we've ever been. We're more isolated than we've ever been. And everybody's a little thrown off, like our mental health is eroding as well. But we have a choice. And that disconnection is what I call the disconnection stress shot. And no, it's not enjoyable like a shot of whiskey. This is when we disconnect. It creates stress in our bodies. Like we create in our brains cortisol, that's the stress chemical, which leads to inflammation in our bodies, and we have adrenaline and the epichemical that's created in our bodies. Have you ever been, say, driving in your car and you had to slam on your brakes to avoid an accident and you feel all tensed up? That's what that epichemical does, and it takes a long time to get rid of the jitters. When you experience those disconnection stress shots, my friends, over a long period of time, it creates inflammation in your body, which leads to arthritis, cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, all of those things. So in our modern times, when on-demand is convenient and we like it, we have to work even harder on building our peopling muscle, my friends. Now, I have been conducting some experiments in waiting rooms, okay? Now, I love people. I never meet a stranger. And so in this experiment, I go in waiting rooms to see what are the social norms. And most times people are on their phones. right? And they're reluctant to engage. So I try to make eye contact with people, look for a victim, a friend that I can talk to. And you see the person who has social anxiety, and they always grab their phone so they don't have to engage with me. And I cannot help but to think about this being a digital pacifier, okay? Now here's a picture of my son Luke when he was a toddler. I did not let my kids suck on binkies or pacifiers, okay? So Luke had to get really creative, and he used Captain America's shield for a pacifier. And so do a lot of us who have social anxiety. When we're around strangers, we use our phone and we suck on it like a digital pacifier. Sorry, friends, I can't make this stuff up. You've experienced it as well. But we have a choice. And so recently I was sitting in a waiting room getting my oil change. Of course, I was looking around for a friend to make. Everybody was on their phones except for this other woman. And we made eye contact, and we started chit-chatting with each other. And before you know it, we started talking about our dogs. How many of you could talk for days about your dogs? Well, she and I started talking about our dogs, and then we start sharing pictures of our puppies. And before you know it, it created like this FOMO in the room, where other people then started joining in the conversation, and they disconnected from their phone, and they connected with us, my friends. And the whole mood elevated. You could feel it in the room. We were so much more joyous. Why? Because we decided to take a shot of the Togethering Super Blend instead of stay disconnected and experience the stress. So we have a choice. Every day we have to look for opportunities to connect or disconnect. And there are consequences and benefits to both. And so, my friends, I have been stalking Ben Ryan, admiring Ben Ryan. By the way, event planner, scan the QR code that you see there on the screen. Ben is amazing. He's as nice as he looks, and he is absolutely brilliant. He's an amazing speaker. Highly recommend him to speak at your conferences. But he wrote a book called Why Brains Need Friends. And it talks about the importance of social connection. One of the things Ben talks about is that division is the enemy of brain health. So biologically, when we were hanging out in caves, we had to tribe up in groups to increase our chances of survival. There's power in numbers. Like, you understand that, okay? And so our brains are very much wired to be connected. And Ben talks about how we are more likely to empathize with people who are more like us, like in our tribe, than those who are not like us. Our us's versus our them's. It's just biological. It's how we work. Now think about it. It's more advantageous for you to empathize with those in your tribe versus those that are not in your tribe, because they might turn around and stab you in the back. So that's how our brains are still very much wired. So think about your favorite sports team, okay? Like this, on this humanity continuum that Ben talks about in his book, oftentimes with our thems, we pity them, but when they're suffering, we really don't care. But for our us's, we're much more compassionate. So like sports teams, I'm from Columbus, Ohio, go Buckeyes, and I have compassion for the Ohio State Buckeyes, okay? But when it comes to the University of Michigan, like, there are rivals. So when they lose, I don't really feel much. I pity them, but I'm not as compassionate. It's us versus them. And so in this multicultural society that we live in, it's really important for us to be able to empathize with lots of different types of people, because guess what? We have to work and play with folks from different tribes all of the time. And because our society is becoming increasingly divided, my friends, this is a skill we have to be intentional about building. I am a living, breathing example of multiculturalism. I am white and I am black. And growing up throughout my life, I never fit in one box or another cleanly. So in order to thrive, I had to learn how to relate to a lot of different people and fit into a lot of different tribes. I can even empathize with bugs, okay? And my best friend calls me the bug whisperer, because they're like attracted to me. You see this picture, butterflies will come land on my hand, and bees, and they don't bother me. And I think my empathy for bug comes from, I ate a lot of them when I was a kid. I'm not ashamed, but I was a master at catching those big black carpenter juicy ants, and boy, it was snack time when I caught one. So guilt is fueling my empathy for bugs. And I walked by this little June bug the other day. He was flipped on his back, and I felt compassion for him. And so I had to step in and help him.
Have a better day, buddy.
Have a better day, buddy. I felt compassion for him. And when my brother saw that, he said, why didn't you just step on him? Well, because I feel compassion. And so what I want to talk about also is tell you a story about recently I was traveling with my kids. And when they sit next to each other on the airplane, they get on my nerves. And so I sit one on one side and one on the other, and I was right in the middle, okay? In the row right in front of us was this gentleman sitting in the window seat, and he was clearly distressed. Like he got up 2 or 3 times to go to the restroom, and the people that were sitting next to him, his row mates, were clearly irritated, and they were bothered by whatever he had going on in his life. And then I saw the flight attendants come and give him a bag of ice, and he was holding the bag of ice on his neck. And I was like, well, nobody around is really paying attention or acting like they see an issue with this gentleman. His English was broken, and he was likely an immigrant from another country. So I reached through the crack of the seats, and I put my hand on his shoulder. And I said, sir, are you okay? And he says, no, I think I'm having a heart attack. And I said, well, tell me more about your symptoms. He said, can I just come sit with you? I said, no, my kids are back here. But that line told me he wasn't having a heart attack. He was having a panic attack. Now, as a prepared mama, I always travel with Dramamine, just in case one of my kids get motion sickness, right? Which is also a nerve pill. So I said, I've got something to make you feel better, honey. So I cracked open 2 of those Dramamine, and I gave it to him. And baby, in 10 minutes, he went from a full-blown panic attack to drooling as he was leaning his head against the window of that airplane. I was like, got him again. And so when we landed, he gave me the biggest hug. And he said, thank you for being there for me and caring enough to ask and to take action. I showed compassion for him, my friends. And you know what happens, and this is according to Ben Ryan's work. By me sharing, being compassionate, it boosted how I felt. It boosted those super blends in my body as well as in his. When you're good to other people, it's good for you and it's good for them. We need to choose to be compassionate. And so what I want to ask you is the people that were surrounding him, what do you think they were feeling on this whole spectrum versus what I was feeling? I told you I was feeling compassionate. What do you think they were feeling? They were likely feeling pity. They were aware he was suffering, but it just didn't bother them. We've got to be able to turn this around, friends, and connect versus disconnect. Now, I want to tell you a story about when I was in college. So I was in college, and I was a snot-nosed freshman. I was walking to class with one of my other freshman friends, another girl. And to get to class, we had to walk by a whole row of cars that were parked along the street. Well, in one of the cars, there was a girl sitting in the passenger seat. And as we got closer to the car, we heard the unmistakable sound of car doors locking. Clunk. And it kind of shook us, and I looked at my friend, and I said, did she just lock the car door? And she says, yes, she did. And we walked silently to the rest of our class. And so the question is, what is it about us, some snot-nosed freshmen at college, caused her to feel threatened to the point where she needed to lock her car? And so what happened, and this is a concept or an analogy called the elephant and the rider. And what this means is that in our brains, the prefrontal cortex is where all our logic and our rational thought process happen. We haven't had that equipment for very long, okay? Our emotions are so much more in control of the decisions that we make versus our logic and our reasoning. And so her elephant took over. And so based on what people have told her, fear and panic set in. And so the question, my friends, is what was her social circle telling her about people like me to make her be afraid and panic when she saw people like me? Sometimes we don't have a choice as to the stress shot we take. Sometimes it can be injected by the perceptions and the perspective that we inherit from those people around us. What if she chose differently? What if she chose connection in the face of her panic? What if she chose, instead of to lock her door, she used that fear as a trigger to connect and simply say, hello. It would have boosted us all instead of created a stressful situation. We have a choice, my friends. And so what I want you to do, take out your phones. I want you to take a picture of this screen, the hate to love continuum, okay? Because there's a lot of ways that we feel and treat people based on those we hate and those that we love. So take a picture. I'll play some music while you take a picture of the screen. All right, elevator music's over. You got a picture of this, save it, because we're going to talk about it some more. I'm going to tell you another story, and then we'll refer to it. So this is an image of my friend, Mr. Richard. He was my neighbor, and unfortunately, he died about 6 months ago. And Mr. Richard, oh, I loved him. We were buddies, okay? He was an old military vet. He was clearly a heartthrob in his younger days, and he still felt like he looked like that same heartthrob. And so whenever I'd see Mr. Richard, I'd give him a kiss on his cheek. And whenever I made something that was extra good, I would always take him a plate. And in the couple months leading up to his death, he was falling down a lot. And his wife would call me and say, hey, Melissa, I'm having trouble getting him up. Can you come and help me? And I would go over and I'd pick Mr. Richard up and I'd say, okay, you got to pay the toll. And he'd kiss me on the cheek. And we were good buddies. Well, one day, Mr. Richard came out of his house and I was pulling weeds in my yard. And he said, Melissa, he was all wound up from some news channel that he'd been plugged into. He said, Melissa, they say on the news that we need to get prepared for race wars. And he said something that really bothered me. He said, but I'm not worried because we have more guns than they do. And friends, in that moment, I could have chosen to cancel my relationship with Mr. Richard in my anger. But instead, I chose to stay connected. And I said, Mr. Richard, so if somebody comes driving down our street and they have guns and they point them at me, are you going to point your gun at them? Or are you going to point your gun at me? And it shook him physically. That question shook him because he came out with that elephant. His emotions were taken over. He was wound up and panicked and prepared to attack. And that question really shook him. And he said, Melissa, I would defend you with my life. And I said, it's okay, Mr. Richard. I love you. It's all right. He says, it's not all right because I realize I've been letting other people do my thinking for me. And so it's so important that we recognize, friends, in a moment, he went from one side of that spectrum, prepared to hate people he didn't know and retaliate, all the way to love because he saw me for that human level on that human layer. That's what we have to get even better at. And friends, we can't have this conversation without talking about, we also bond over hatred too. And those of you who have been around long enough probably lived through 9/11. And I remember the night after the attacks, everything was quiet. There was no one on the street. There were no planes in the air. It was silent. And when we identified that Osama bin Laden had been identified as the mastermind behind the attacks, it bonded the tribes in America around one tribe, a patriotic tribe of being American, because we connected over a common enemy. We bond over hatred too. And today, because in our polarized society, I see so many people bonding over hatred for the other political party. It is still a way to bond, but it's so much less healthy for us to bond that way than when we bond over love, my friends. And so one thing I have learned is to fish for commonalities when you relate to other people. Let's watch this quick video.
Luke! You're warming, baby.
Hold on. Get him, Lukey!
Oh, I think he got a crappie. Oh, he got a crappie.
Get him, Luke!
Now that's a baby crappie.
You know what that is?
A sheephead.
You got that right. Good job,
What do
Luke.
you say?
Go fishing for a friend, my friends. And so don't go fishing for differences, fish for commonalities. And when you find them, set the hook and catch a friend. What kind of bait do you use? Things that everybody cares about. Family, food, hometown, hobbies, travel, passions, and sports. That's how you can relate. And when you find something in common, reel them in a little closer, and before you know it, you have caught a friend. I told you about my father passing away, and when he passed away, I was worried that we would lose my mom to heartbreak as well. But she went to grief counseling, and she met friends, and they brought joy into her life and made her feel healthier and happier. And she's with us to this day because of social connection. And the people you're seeing here on the screens bring joy to my life. And so scan the QR code you see on the screen. so you can review this presentation and think about how you are going to choose to connect in the future. And what I want to leave you with is pain is inevitable. Thriving is an option. Choose to live well, friends.